I get goosebumps thinking about it still. It was such a great
I mean,
time.
even I watched it after the fact and I was like, that's pretty good.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, a podcast that features conversations with speedrunners, developers, content creators, and everything in between. This is episode 75, and today we're going to be talking with Savestate. Savestate, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. Feeling great after a week of work, ready for the weekend, ready to talk with you on the podcast.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to make sure I kind of get some of this right. So Ocarina, you're a speedrunner, a lot of Ocarina of Time, but also you're one of the moderators on SRC, the leaderboards, one of the Discord moderators, one of the community moderators. I believe you also
it usually is shared between all three of them.
Shared between all three. Okay, perfect. That's the perfect way to say it. That's a good point. I guess we have to communicate as mods somewhere, right? So. And then, but also, it seems like you've done a fair amount of work in glitch hunting and things like that. You have done. It seems like you've done work outside of just doing the routes and speedrunning yourself.
Usually with SRM, I'll help with figuring out a lot of the smaller details regarding setups or finding. Heap manipulations is one of the terms that we use, which is where we load stuff in memory in a certain way so that particular bits of data will load in a specific spot. And you can like modify that with changing what's loaded between room transitions and stuff like that. But in addition to that, just like helping around with some of the nitty gritty details of it. Yeah.
Well, I've appreciated your commentary over the last few years on various different Ocarina of Time marathon presentations and things like that, because there's always something new, it seems like, in Ocarina of Time, and trying to keep up with it is not easy, especially I'm just a fan, I'm like, I don't speedrun it myself, so it's like, appreciate the commentary. So I'm really glad I get a chance to talk to you, and we'll get into the games done, the SGDQ run and all that kind of stuff. But first, before we get into any of that stuff, how about a little bit about yourself? When did you start playing games? Like, what's kind of your history with just video games, even before speedrunning and all that stuff?
Well, when I was a kid, I would say that I was like your pretty generic poster Nintendo video game child. We had a Super Nintendo when I was really small, and we had a couple mainline games from the Nintendo franchise, like Super Mario World and some Kirby games. I remember playing what was it? The Kirby golf game, Kirby's Dream Course. Yeah, Kirby's Dream Course for the Super Nintendo. I remember playing that a lot. But then shortly after, we got a 64, and we had Mario 64, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. There's also like Mario Kart, and I think Beetle Adventure Racing was another one that we played, but we had a big stack of carts and a bunch of games that we would just swap between. I would play with my brothers and sisters. We had a decent sized family, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and so we'd always rotate between playing with each other or like just playing the solo games alone. And then later on, eventually got a GameCube, and the GameCube I got specifically was the collector's edition, which had all the emulated versions of the older Zelda games. So that's where I got to play Majora's Mask for the first time, and like the NES versions of Zelda 1 and Zelda 2. And then sort of just went on from there.
I'm glad.
Stayed up to.
No, please finish.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and then I stayed up to date until I would say after the Wii. After the Wii, I sort of, I think that was like the last major console I had. I've had the Switch for a little while. I also had a Wii U for a little while, but both of them, they didn't really stick.
I totally understand, especially with the libraries, considering one of the things about the Wii is just the vast amount of things how many games you can play with it nowadays. You mentioned something I think, I'm not sure if I had the same experience, but I had something similar where when GameCube came out, I didn't buy it until long into its lifespan, so I got it used and it was less expensive and all that kind of stuff. But that collector's edition of Zelda kind of re-sparked my love and affinity for like retro games. Up at that point, I'd kind of been emulating some stuff. Maybe the emulator emulators were very new back then. But I remember loving Zelda and all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, Ocarina of Time has just been my favorite game. I still consider it my favorite game, but the series in general, I just love the Zelda series. But being able to rediscover those games, there was something about that disc that I'm like, and I knew it was emulated and everything, but seeing it on, some bigger TVs maybe than I played with as a kid, or maybe it was, as a kid too, some of our TVs were black and white, and the RF connection, everything. It seemed like this really clean, great way at the time to play some Zelda. So
yeah,
that's so cool.
I mean, the resolution was double the 64 because it was on the GameCube, and it looked great, played great. It was just a solid experience.
I totally agree. And I'm curious what your first experience, or even if you can remember what your first experience with like Ocarina of Time and playing through that game or at least early experiences with the game. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, when I played it on the 64, when I was really small, I remember that I was too scared to get through the Deku Tree. Mostly because of Goma, the first boss was too scary. So I think that's about where my playthrough stopped until I had my brother beat it for me. And then after that, I remember sort of walking around like Hyrule and Death Mountain for a while, and then I sort of forgot about it until the collector's edition came through, and then I was like, oh, this is the game I played a couple years ago. Let's play through it again. And that time it was much less. I was no longer a young child, but a couple years older, and so I was able to power through the scary parts. But yeah, and then I remember playing Majora's Mask as well. Majora's Mask I played before OOT actually. Once I got the collector's edition, because it was I had played Ocarina of Time before, so I was more interested in the new thing. And that ended up being the first video game I'd ever beaten without using the internet as a guide. So I was really proud of that.
I'm impressed. That wasn't easy back then.
Yeah. No, I remember it was challenging, but there's also a lot of side content in that game that you can skip. So it's
a good point.
If I were to 100% that game, it would have been a different story, but no, just beating it was fine.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned something there that I think is so important. At least this was definitely my first experience as well. It's how you got terrified by the Deku Tree and you couldn't even get past that part. That was in high school, even in high school. So I've always been a kid who kind of enjoyed the sci-fi and the fantasy stuff. So my imagination kind of runs wild when I'm watching movies, reading books, playing games. And the first experience with Ocarina of Time was like that, where it felt like this real world that you got to interact with. And so the fact that you couldn't get past the Deku Tree, I could totally relate, just because it seemed like a place that really existed. And it's tough to put into words that first, your first time playing this game, if you were of an age where you're impressionable like that, right? Mm-hmm. So cool. Well, yeah. I'm glad you finally got past it, but actually went for it.
Yeah.
So then tell us a little bit about how you discovered speedrunning, or even thought about or considered speedrunning in the first place.
So I guess just in late 2015, like early 2016, I got into Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is a Nintendo competitive fighting game for the Nintendo GameCube. And a part of that is these one player, like in the game, like not part of the competitive scene, but in the game, there's like these one player strategy, not strategy, but execution tests where you can try to hit a sandbag as far as you can within a certain amount of time. That's home run contest. You build damage on it, and then you hit it with a home run bat and see how far it goes. And you have about 10 seconds to do that. And so you could try to optimize like a strategy you come up with to get as much damage as you can within that 10 seconds and hit it as far as you can. And then there's also the target test stages where each character has their own stage of 10 targets, and you're supposed to hit all 10 of them as fast as possible. And however long it takes, it'll tell you, and you can sort of work on perfecting your execution or coming up with new strategies to try and beat that. And so I was sort of approached by a friend of mine. Once the well, there was at the time, I think in late 2016, or no, it was late 2017. This is about a year and a half after I got into it. I was hanging out at my parents' place, sort of just waiting for a new job, and a friend of mine approached me with the idea of using something called Ocarina codes, which are sort of like Game Shark codes, but for GameCube games. And what this code allows you to do is like you can play these break the target stages as one character on other characters' stages.
Oh, cool.
So normally break the targets, each character has their own unique stage. And so what we did was we used a Game Shark, an Ocarina code to force your character to always be a certain character. So whenever you pick a character on the break the target stage, it'll load that character's stage, but with the character you forced it to pick in the code.
Totally.
And so this is something that was called a mismatch targets test, break the target stage. And we decided to sort of have like this, like to sort of pass the time while I'm like waiting to like find a new job or whatever, to pass the time by trying to beat all character stages with Link, who is one of the fighting characters in that game. And so we spent like about I'd say a year or so just optimizing and like perfecting and challenging each other's different strategies to try to get the times lower for all these stages with Link. And it's a very cool like strategy in particular, especially with Link, because he has projectiles like the boomerang and the bow and arrow and bombs. And that's something that not a lot of other characters really can utilize, especially boomerang. Boomerang is by far the most interesting item you can use in break the targets, because on its way back, it can just go through walls. Like after you throw it out and it comes back, if you like dodge it or you hit it off of a wall, and like the returning arc for the boomerang, once it's returning towards you, it has no more collision and it can just go through walls and hit like targets that would normally take longer to like go around and hit them. So routing boomerangs was a really cool thing. And so we sort of did this for about a year, and that was a lot of fun. That got me into the Super Smash Brothers Melee stadium like speedrunning scene, where people would normally like try to beat the vanilla game as fast as possible, like the different target tests and all that stuff. And so that was sort of like my first exposure to like speed running, where you try to optimize strats to get a lower to time. That was a lot of fun. And
it definitely I mean, everything you're describing is some of the essence of speedrunning at times, where we like to get in there and break things and try things that have, shouldn't be possible, but end up being possible. So I could definitely see the seed being planted there. That is so cool. So how did that lead into then even considering Ocarina of Time or going that route and finding that game to speedrun?
Well, in the Super Smash Brothers Melee scene, you're sort of adjacent to like gaming as a whole. And so eventually you're sort of going to like have a little crossover with other things in like the greater gaming sphere. And at one point I had, and through this, like I'd gotten more into the concept of speedrunning. I've heard about it. So I did some like YouTube searches or whatever and found like Ocarina of Time speedruns and like glitch playthroughs and stuff like that. And I remember finding some old, like or not old, but at the time they were pretty new, goal-based or restriction-based like playthroughs of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, where like you're only allowed to pause a certain amount of times. It's like, how do we get around only pausing the game 2 times in Majora's Mask?
Oh, wow.
Like what route do we have to take so that we can do that? And I remember watching a couple of those and being like, wow, this game you can do some crazy stuff in this game, for both Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. And so since I had been helping stream on Twitch for our Super Smash Brothers Melee locals, I was familiar with the platform. So I looked up like Ocarina of Time, like speedrunning. Well, I looked at the category, and I found Torje, which is he's an Ocarina of, well, he was an Ocarina of Time speedrunner, and now he's really, really good at Apex Legends. And he was grinding what was then any percent and now called Defeat Ganon for Ocarina of Time at the time. And I was like fascinated. I was like, this is, I had no idea that you could like take this game that I had played as a kid and like turn it into like this challenge for yourself where you exploit all these game mechanics to beat it as fast as possible. And I thought that was really cool. It was like a way to take this game that I had known and played for a large portion of my life and like see it in a whole new way. So it showed that it had a lot more to give, and I was very interested in that. So I remember just watching him play that for pretty much all of 2018 to like mid 2019. And after long enough time, I was like, I could probably try doing this myself. It's like, it seems kind of interesting. And so I joined the Discord and started learning how to do the any percent route at the time.
It's cool to hear that's your way. And there's always, it's always fascinating to me to hear the origin stories, especially with the categories. As far as I know, have changed. They're not called the same thing that they used to. And even before then, Runner Guy was on the podcast a while ago and talked about how, it used to be segmented runs and all these different type of things, seeing how the community has changed over the course of now, decade and a half of what we know of as speedrunning, which might've been done before us, but video evidence and all that kind of stuff. So you mentioned any percent being your first, was that your first attempts or first category you decided to dive into?
Yeah. Any percent was the first. It's what a lot of people at the time would learn, because there was only like 2 or 3 major tricks that you needed to learn, like for like the speedrun to complete. Like everything else was optional. Like you could like casually play through the rest of it. Like you just need to know ISG for the Ganon fight. You need to learn Ganondorf. That was the big one. Where you do Ocarina items on the blue warp, which allows you to like delay it, and then you go through the door after some particular movement to delay it a certain amount of time, and then you wrong warp to the Ganon sequence. Like that ISG and that are like the 2 major things, and then also dying whenever you do the final hit on Goma. Although I think you could safe warp out, but it's yeah, you have to do like some backup stuff. But it was a pretty forgiving route. Like you could like if you weren't doing the hardest strats at the time, you could play through it pretty easily.
I've kind of always been fascinated by the consoles that the speedrunners choose to play on, especially for this game. And I'm curious, at that time when you first got started, are people running it on Virtual Console at this point? Are we still, I shouldn't say, I'm curious what was available. Like what was kind of the trend at that time as far as consoles go? Which version?
For consoles, I think the primary console was Wii Virtual Console. Although at the time, version 1.0 for the Nintendo 64 was faster for certain categories. I don't remember which one, but that's or which categories. I think it was GSR. It was faster, and then maybe all dungeons. I can't quite remember, but that's because of blank A, which allowed for which is a glitch that allows you to get bomb chews in bottom of the well a lot quicker than at the time. Now we have some new strats that equalize or make it faster for the newer consoles, but at the time it was faster for 1.0 to use blank A glitch in bottom of the well to get chews, because because Nintendo 64 1.2 and Wii Virtual Console and GameCube all required you to get Ocarina first, which like you have to sit through a cutscene, and you don't have to do that with 1.0 blank A. You just need Deku Sticks and Deku Nuts for that. So it was able to get started a lot quicker. Um, yeah, I think that's about it. But besides that, everything else was Wii Virtual Console. I think IQ was still technically the fastest at the time, but not a lot of people had access to it. So
I'd even heard of it until people had mentioned that it was the fastest. I'm like, what the hell's an IQ? I don't remember that in the States at all.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go over just a couple of quick data points from Ocarina of Time, which even in 2018, my memory could be cloudy on this point, but I remember Ocarina of Time still being a pretty popular speedrun at the time. But as of this recording, we're in July in 2022. Over 1,700 players have submitted runs to the Ocarina of Time leaderboards. Over 8,600 runs exist. This is still a game that sees a lot of love and affection, and still, but a very active community as far as this goes. Since you started in, running it yourself, I'm curious, what are some of the big glitches or some of the big discoveries? I know what we'll get into here, but I'm just curious from your point of view, what are some of the big discoveries you've seen in the game and how it's changed over just those 4 years?
Well, I mean, of course, the big one is SRM, stale reference manipulation, and arbitrary code execution. But there's been a lot of small stuff found since then. We found quick put away, which was a pretty major glitch for Defeat Ganon. It's I think taken about 30 to 40 seconds off of the category. So even if SRM and Ace didn't exist, we would have had a major any percent change in the past couple of years because of quick put away. And that glitch in particular allows us to put a glitch damage value on our power crouch stab. Like normally whenever you crouch stab in Ocarina of Time, it takes on the property of whatever the last move you used was, because it doesn't have a set property itself. So if you have if you have a hammer and you jump slash with it, and then you pull out the Master Sword and you crouch stab, the crouch stab for the Master Sword will have the power value of the jump slash for the hammer. And so you can use your Master Sword crouch stab to break rocks and stuff like that. So it looks a little silly. But this quick put away glitch allows you to put a glitch damage value that also has fire magic in your last used attack. So you can put fire magic on your sword, poke the web, and it burns, which is a lot quicker than the old setup where you had to climb up and do get ISG and do a twisted side hop onto the webs and then frame perfectly side hop off of them. And there was a big complicated setup to break the web quickly but now we can just get a QPA, quick put away, and break a stick with it and then poke the web and you go down, and that saves about 40 seconds. That was a pretty big one. It also changed I think a couple other categories as well. Not in as major of a way, but there's also been things like Jungle Jump, which is the name for getting the bow early in the Forest Temple using entrance point glitch, which allows us to jump up to the room where the bow is from the lower room by hookshotting the chest that spawns in there and dying on the same frame. And that does a hook shot jump. So you go to the very top and you can activate the fight from up there by dying once, or not dying, but by voiding out once you're up there. And you can get the bow early. But there's also been lunge storage, which was something that was found relatively recently. It was over the Christmas break it was found, or I think it was found a little bit before then, but a lot of applications for it were found during the Christmas break, during a month-long event where we did a Christmas reveal holiday card special where we a couple of community members grouped together to do some strat finding, and every other day, I think it was about every other day of December, they revealed a new strat or application or glitch entirely over the Christmas month. And so one of them, a couple of them were lunge storage applications, which allowed us to get dot skip with lunge storage, which is a lot easier to do than the old like side roll, side flip through the door, which you had to is a little tricky if you weren't like familiar with how Ocarina of Time moves. And then there was also things like skull push that was revealed, which is the one that sort of outdated the blank A method of getting bomb chews in Bottom of the Well. This allows you to use the skull that shows up in the bottom of the well whenever like you go down and like the skulltula is there and he's hanging down, he's blocking your way. There's a setup now that we can use that whenever you kill it with like a deku stick, you can backwalk as it's falling. And whenever you do that, it pushes you through some collision on the wall and allows you to clip through and get, and you can like fall out of bounds and take the out of bounds water up and get bomb chews. And then of course we can go back to SRM and Ace, the big one that was found that changed a lot of the speedrunning landscape for the game. That was glitches and stuff messing around in Forest Temple. There's videos describing what it is, how it was found, but basically glitches and stuff, which is one of the glitch hunters for Ocarina of Time, was doing some testing in Forest Temple. Used it to get a gold Skulltula token, went through a door and back, and something else loaded in place where the gold Skulltula token was, but it was still attached to the boomerang. And then now we can beat the game in less than 7 minutes. So.
So to touch upon something you mentioned, something like QPA where we quick put away, it seems like when a new discovery like that is made, it really opens up the creativity type of things. And so I'm curious, when something like that is discovered, do a bunch of people like yourself and others just go start testing this on different areas and different locations, different, and maybe walk through that process a little bit, because, I assume it's just trial and error kind of thing, but is there any sort of plan? What's that process like? Because I've noticed a lot of Ocarina of Time streamers as well will just kind of sometimes stream that process, or at least share the videos of that process. And it's kind of endlessly fascinating, but really creative at the same time.
Yeah, so a lot of times there'll be like a lead where someone like has an idea or finds like a weird thing, and or maybe it is like they just find like quick put away and they're like, okay, what can we do with this? There'll be people that who are familiar with the game who will take this new information and try to apply it in other ways or in useful ways. A lot of times it is trial and error. But there is some people that are familiar with how to like use math to help figure out whether or not strategies and tricks and work can work in certain ways, and the like finding positions based off of coordinates for vertices and stuff. I don't do that. I know a couple of people do. There's also, now for stale reference manipulation, Mr. Cheese, who is one of the people who helped early on with a lot of like understanding how it works, has made a lot of really useful tools for finding finding ways to manipulate memory in particular ways to get certain things to load in as like special, like in a specific spot for to make things work. So we can sort of like simulate if Link was in the Lost Woods, if he loaded stuff in this room and then went to this room, like where in memory stuff would be. And we can just like type in our parameters and press a button and then just let it do a bunch of simulations without actually having to test it on console. So that speeds testing things up by some sort of multiple magnitudes. Yeah. I've also helped, the biggest tool that I've helped make is something called the angle finder, which whenever we do SRM, one of the main ones we do is for 100% and for all dungeons SRM. One of the glitches we do allows us to get a particular entrance that takes us anywhere based on our current facing angle. And so I helped make a program that understands all of the internal like movement options for Ocarina of Time, like side hop, side roll, all the movement options that change your angle. Like quick spin will change your angle, like slashing the big Goron sword will, a bunch of other movement options as well. And this tool will give in a list of input angles, and you can sort of like go to nearby walls and like target them to see what their angle are. Given a list of input angles and a list of desired output angles, it'll tell you the quickest way to get to those angles just by input, like internal like game engine inputs. So like if you want to go from this angle to this angle, it'll say like do a side hop, side roll, do a quick spin, ESS up, turn left, and then like do ESS 3 to the right 3 times, and you'll be there. And then from there, you can use that angle to warp to the intended place that you need to for the next part in the run.
I'm chuckling because it's just wonderful to have this many people working on a game, you know, where you get to create tools like this that I'm sure is super useful and helpful. I mean, knowing exactly what the angles are, and then I assume from there you can go find setups, or does the tool provide you, you know, does it help you find those setups as well? Like I'm kind of curious about how that goes about.
Yeah, like well, in this case, the list of actions is the setup to get the angle. So yeah, so like you would be in a particular place and you're like, okay, I need to go to this place next. Like, what are the nearby angles? What are my items I have available to me? Like, plug those into it and it'll tell you what you need to do.
Very cool. And so this kind of leads to the next question then. So with SRM and arbitrary code execution being one example of kind of fundamentally changing some of the speedruns foundations of it, how does the community then decide to possibly change category rules and category names and what the category actually is? Or I'm curious the process then it goes about then to, you know, hey, look, changes the game pretty big. What do we do next? Like, how does that come about, especially with the community as large as Ocarina of Time?
Yeah. Well, of course, whenever we have a really big change that affects things in a way, we sort of have to recalibrate how we look at the current state of the game and categories and rule sets. So what we'll usually do is figure out, okay, this new thing affects this particular part of Ocarina of Time speedruns a lot, so we need to talk about that. So what we'll usually do is open up like a discussion channel for like, hey, this thing affects us in a major way. Let's talk about it. And then the whole community can give their input, and we'll have a big discussion. Sometimes it'll be broken into multiple channels if there's enough aspects of it to where it's worth splitting it up like that. And then we'll just talk. We'll talk about to figure out like the scope of the changes that we might need to implement and how everyone feels about it. And that will take a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on how big the changes are, of just figuring out what we need to even like consider is within scope of like potential changes in the speedrun. And then after that, once we sort of have an idea of what this affects, parameters we can sort of bring into it to say like to like split like points of discussion up regarding it, and we'll try to like come up with a form for people to vote on how to implement these changes, or if there should be changes, and potential methods of implementation, and like impact and all that stuff. So like, for example, SRM, there was what categories should have SRM, and like the limitations of SRM and a bunch of other stuff. Oh, excuse me. And then and then after everyone has like cast their vote, the mods will go through, prune any votes that like are not from community members, because we'll get that a lot of times. Whenever there's a big change in the community, there'll be like stream monsters or viewers or people who come in like externally who feel like they have a really strong opinion and that it should be a part of this community that they're not actively invested in. So
Totally.
we'll have to usually remove them, because whenever we have votes, we'll have like a line that says like post your involvement or like a speed run that you've done in the past for Ocarina of Time, to show community involvement. And if there's not a real answer there, then we'll remove it. But yeah, so it's a process. It's discussion, figuring out the variables, presenting it to the community in the form of a form, and then processing and figuring out what's next, and then implementing the changes.
It's quite a process, and I did a little bit of research before our conversation, specifically about what we're about to talk about with the timing and new rules to that. And I appreciated the fact that there had to have been some sort of investment from the person making the vote. And I think that's something really important, because people like me, fans, we have our opinions. Well, we might spatter it off on Twitter and whatnot, you know. And it's great that we're invested as fans, but in the end, the runners are the people who are going to have to be the ones responsible for this. And I think that's a great way to have some ownership of your vote and everything like that. So pretty good. So let's talk about that. Recently, and I'll let you describe what the proposal was, and then what changes ended up being implemented as far as timing goes. But before we get to that, I really want to highlight kind of, we've seen this change now over a few years in our speedrunning community at large, about trying to make speedruns a bit more accessible and a bit more taking into account the quality of life of an actual, every time you have to press the reset button. And we've seen it like, as, for example, Breath of the Wild, if you do a 100% run, you can take, you get to take a 24-hour break, or you can say you don't have to do a 24-hour run all at once. And I just see changes like that make such a huge difference to quality of life, and making a run like that may not have been accessible to somebody before, may now be. 24-hour runs a little bit something completely different. But so tell us a little bit about what happened here recently in Ocarina of Time and what the end result was.
So recently you may have heard, you and the audience and anyone else watching, may have heard about the introduction cutscenes for Ocarina of Time being voluntary now. We had it's been a point of discussion for many years. We even have forum posts from 2010 on people saying, "Hey, should we be allowed to just save in Link's house?" From old notable speedrunners. And so it's been a point of discussion that's been brought up many times over the years, and people eventually were like, "Yeah, let's like consider this seriously, because it's been brought up enough. How do people feel about it?" Watching the intro for Ocarina of Time, because it is just 3 minutes of text mashing before you have control of Link. So we're like, is that necessary for the game? Is this considered valuable gameplay? And what does it mean to have the intro as a part of the speedrun? And these are like questions that we took to the community. And we open, just like with the SRM vote and with every other vote we've ever had, we open up a discussion channel for it. And we had people talking about it. It got a lot of messages very quickly. So it was sort of hard to keep up with it. So we made an offshoot channel for like writing out your well thought multiple paragraph opinion about introduction skips. So you're allowed to post once per day in there. Usually you just post your one-time opinion, though, after you've discussed long enough in the regular discussion channel, to sort of like hash out your thoughts, view what other people think, all that stuff. And so we did this for long enough time, and we were just to sort of like feel how the community felt about it. If there was like not a lot of interest, we wouldn't worry about it. If there was a lot of people that were like, yeah, this would be nice if we could do this. And there was a lot. There was a considerable amount of people who thought that the intro was not worth sitting through to them personally. And so after seeing enough feedback about that, we went through the process of figuring out, okay, how do we present this? How do we present skipping the introduction in a way to like viewers, how do we implement this? And so not to viewers, to runners, how do we implement this? And so we discussed different ways to do it. Like, do we add on the time from the intros? Do we like start at 2 minutes, 50 whatever seconds in Link's house so that the timing stays with older runs? Or do we just cut out the intro entirely and like timing starts once you have control of Link, like with the new file? And the way that we implement this introduction, skipping the introduction cutscene, is once you watch the introduction, you just save immediately in Link's house, and then you reset, and then you have your file that hasn't even left Link's house yet, but it skipped the introduction. It's very easy to set up. You just save as soon as it's over, and then you make a copy of it so you can like start over if you need to like make a save with that file or whatever, and then just copy it over again once you need it. But yeah, so we figured asking the community, like, how do we implement this? What's the best way? And we came up with 2 different potential implementations. Plan A was starting timing at the existing time with introduction, which is a little different depending on what platform and language you're using. So like WeVC Japanese is like 2:59, and like GameCube would be like something longer. I think it's closer to 3 minutes or maybe a little over 3 minutes. And then you would just attach that time to your final time of actual gameplay to create the new time, so that it's comparable to older runs. Or another timing method was just cutting out the intro completely. 0 starts once you have control of Link, and you move, and we have to go and retime every single run that has ever been submitted to the board. And
8,000 something runs over the course of.
Well, it's so 8,000, sure, but I think it's about 1,700 personal bests though. So there's a lot of obsoleted runs that we would be skipping, but it's still a lot of runs.
Still massive.
Yeah, it's still a lot. But we were like, it is a lot, but it is a finite amount. We can go through it all, and that would save us having to like I think the primary like viewpoint for like why we shouldn't do plan A is we're not counting the intro anymore. The game doesn't include intro timing. Why are we like the game doesn't include the intro anymore? Why are we timing for it? And so it's like if you think like 5 or 10 years down the line, like maybe people who weren't around for the introduction skip vote, they're like, why do we add this arbitrary amount of time to this speed run when we don't even when it's not a part of the game anymore? So we were like, so the majority ended up going with plan A, which is retiming everything. Timing starts from 0. So now we're retiming everything. It's been going pretty fast, actually. I think we're already about 30% done, which is considerably faster than we imagined it would have taken. And I think we want to do the best time for every runner's like times for every console. So like if someone has a console like a 64 submission personal best and a Wii VC personal best, I think we want to time the best run for every runner, for every category, for every console. That way, like if someone wants to see the 64 record for a category, all those times that will be listed will have the introduction removed from them. But yeah, so now that's what we're doing with the introduction skip.
There was a concession made that I really appreciated as part of this rule change as well, was allowing kind of a buffer, if you will, like around, I think it's around, is it 10 seconds at the beginning of the run where you can set your camera? Yeah. And I thought that's a really cool way also, or just it makes it a bit more, you can get things set the way that you want before you've actually moved Link at all. And we've seen this in the Sonic community as one that I thought of right away, where like, because they use in-game timer, they can pause, but they only have a certain amount of time to do it, but they can do it. And because you don't want to break the game that way. You want the game to still exist the way it does. And so I thought that was kind of a nice little concession as well. And I'm curious, but as to why something like that exists though, what's the importance of setting the camera properly before you take off with Link on his adventure?
Yeah. So whenever you start the game from the introduction cutscene, whenever Link gets out of bed, the game will automatically switch to overhead cam. And from there, you just hold up left. So you can just like here's Link in his bed, and you hold up left or down left, and then you just like go around and you hold up left, and then you hold down down left or just straight left or whatever afterwards. And if you don't do that, like if you start from a save warp out of Link's house with the race file, with the introduction removed, the camera starts in front of Link, and you have to sort of like hold down and then like slightly angled, and then as the camera rotates, you have to rotate the stick with it. So it's a very awkward movement. There's a lot of room for losing time just leaving Link's house with this, by combining the rotation of the camera along with Link's like movement. It's very clunky. It's not great. And if you just move it to overhead cam, you just hold the two directions. It's up left, and then you're left again, and you're good. You're out of the house.
Very cool. Okay, that sounds great. And I'm it's cool. This seems like such a great change for the community, and I was actually a little surprised. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but as I was looking through your all's Discord, I noticed that the vote, there were still many folks on both sides, to say the least. Like there were, do you have, I don't know if you have the final numbers as far as this passed by, and I'm curious, was there any sort of like requirement for this to be finally changed as far as the voting process goes?
Yeah, so this is a very major change, because in particular, this isn't a change like that came from the game itself. This wasn't new tech that we found. This was change in how we time runs, which is kind of unusual. Almost every type of change has been pressured internally from the game, but this change came from external, from the runners themselves, wanting to change how they play the game. And so with this being such a major change, we required a supermajority of 55% of the vote, as opposed to normally just 50% for results to go one way or the other. I think the result ended up being about it was 58% or 59% for intro skip, and then like 41 or 42% to not. But we did get that large majority to go through, and so the result ended up being skipping the intro.
And here we are. That's and now you're 30% of the way through retiming stuff. Quite a process, but I think that shows you kind of the dedication and the devotion of the community to, hey, we went through the quote unquote democratic process to get where we are, and now we have to follow through with it. And I think that's really great to see. And I've already, as I was looking through some of the runs, I was noticing retimed, that they've told you about the retiming in the notes and stuff, so you can see where things are. And I got to tell you, as a fan of speedrunning, I speedrun myself, but as a fan, I love going through obsoleted runs and kind of seeing the history of a speedrun at times, So the fact that we have the tools to do that, I think it's really helpful to know that at some point this changed and all that kind of stuff. And I love the idea that the community is thinking forward. Like, what's the next generation? There's going to be new speedrunners who don't know the 15 years or so that have come before this. So I think it's really a great way to kind of just set up for success for the next generation or whatever comes next, Mm-hmm. So I think it's really cool. I think we've done a lot of the speedrun itself and the community and the game and all that kind of stuff. I got to tell you, as we shift here towards the SGDQ run from this year, it was by far, so I'm going to geek out here a little bit, by far, it just touched me in a way that I have never been moved before as far as performance I've seen at GDQ. And it was my favorite run, but I'm curious the story and how you got involved with something like this. Tell us a little bit about what exactly we saw at SGDQ 2022, but also then some of the backstory. How'd you get involved with this?
So at the time, so this was the team had been working on this project for just right after Ace was found. which was in like mid or late 2019. And at the time, I was one of the speedrunners for 80%. So I was very familiar with how SRM and ACE worked on an execution level. I was still learning about SRM at a fundamental level, programming level at the time, but as an execution, as per execution, I was pretty well familiar with it. And so they had been, I think this is around mid 2020. They had been working on this for a while now, but they didn't really have anyone that could complete the portion to get up to ACE, so that they could plug up TASBot and he'll do his thing.
The RTA side of things, if you will.
Yeah, the RTA part at the beginning. So Mr. Cheese reached out to me, who was also part of the team, and he was like, "Hey, we need someone to press buttons really quickly, not as quick as TASBot, but a little bit slower than him, but to get up to the point to get TASBot to press buttons." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun. I'll join." And so I got into the Discord, and they showed me the project at that point in time, which was just a small demo of what was yet to come, but it was very fascinating. And so I was sort of like I also helped a bit with updating what strategies they were using with the intro. They were using an older version of ACE that had since been updated, and so I helped them get I helped them update to the newer strategy, as well as did some research in Project 64 to figure out some addresses that they needed to repatch, so that they could fix a particular actor that we SRM'd, so they could fix that with the bootloader code that they're using, so that it doesn't crash once we're done using it. As well as help them with any other sort of the weird intricacies of SRM and debugging why certain things would or wouldn't work. But after all of that was set up, I wasn't super involved for a while. I was sort of just eye in on the Discord as they did most of the work, because like I said, I'm just the RTA runner. The rest of the team did all the hard work with assets and story building and all that good stuff. But anytime they were like, okay, we've got these changes we need to test, let's make sure it all works on console, on vanilla hardware, they'd go to me, and I'd do the setup, and they sent me a little miniature TAS TM32, which did all the TASBot stuff. Plug those up to the ports, I'd run through it, make sure it all worked, and if that was good, then and I'd usually stream it to the Discord so that they could watch it happen and stuff. So that was my role in the whole grand scheme of things, was mostly just final hardware testing and execution for to get TASBot to do his thing.
Make sure it could be actually achieved in real life, to say the least. The beta presentation part of this, which is this content that, was found out over the last few years, probably longer than that, of content that it was in the game at some point during development. I wasn't too familiar with that until a few years ago when the Hard for Games folks started releasing some of the things that they had and stuff like that on their YouTube channel. And I was wondering, did you have any experience with some of the content, the beta content before, or was this your introduction to it? I'm curious about your own experience with that.
I was pretty familiar actually with some beta content that was on the cart, because when I was in middle school, I remember messing with emulators and a bunch of game chart codes that existed that were all throughout the internet at the time. Right. And one of the places that I went to a lot was Zelda's Secret Ocarina, which hosted a bunch of these game chart codes that you could type in, and some of them was spawning the R-Wing, and there's some other stuff, but I think almost everyone at some point, if you were anywhere that if you did some research or you had a game shark or whatever, you had spawned an R-Wing at some point in your time, or you watched someone else do it. And then there's also people who have like opened up the game, found unused resources, and those were documented. There's also other actors like if you remember the exploding rupee, that was also that's a real beta actor. Like you can spawn the giant rupee that explodes. Doesn't have the Running Man behind it, but but that actor itself that explodes when you touch it, that actually does exist. There's also a bunch of other like more like not as interesting actors that aren't used, but they just exist in the game. But then there's also like the butterfly display list that has the glitched textures that we fixed in the presentation, the Kokori heads and bodies for the beta actors that we mixed together to have a functioning actor there. Yeah.
So there are so many things I really enjoyed about the run. The amount that you all had to do to work together to make it happen was really kind of mind-boggling, to be honest with you. As you start off the run, it kind of seems, I don't want to say, it just seems there was the storytelling process you all decided to come together for was amazing, because it kind of starts, we hear some of these terms we've heard before, but also you get some of the geekiness of the TASBot and stuff like that. And then the run just starts to reveal itself through the storytelling process as you keep going through it. And I guess my first question is, what kind of rehearsal, if there was any, if you're able to do this, especially in COVID times, how do you prepare something like this? How long did that kind of take, and what was that process like?
We did lots of rehearsals, lots and lots of rehearsals, especially as the week of the event. We did multiple rehearsals every day in like one of the training rooms. Like we got in the back corner because we didn't want other runners to see what was going on.
Yeah.
So we picked the setup in the corner, and we did a bunch of rehearsals every day of the week. But like a couple months leading up to it, we all got in a Discord call. I like plugged my 64 up to my capture card and shared that through the Discord, and we would just do what you saw on the presentation. We just got together, we pretended we were in front of the audience, and we played through the game and we presented it and everything like that. So yeah, we would just do that a couple of times, made sure that everything flowed well and everything worked and there's no issues with the run. As we would do it, we would sort of like figure out what worked where, like commentary wise, what we might need to do somewhere else. And we sort of just fine-tuned it with repetition and figuring out what we like best, and change things we didn't like or remove them, and then added things we came up with. And that eventually culminated to the presentation you got at GDQ.
I wasn't able to be in the room during the time, so I was watching this on the stream, and it was a little tough to tell. TASBot has some visual representations. You can see the buttons lighting up and stuff that TASBot is pressing. One of the things I was curious about is TASBot just doing inputs all the time during the run once TASBot gets involved, or is TASBot reacting to what you're doing? I'm curious how that process works together to get all of that data into the N64.
Yeah, so TASBot can't see the 64, at least not initially. So what we have to do is we have to get the run up to a certain point, RTA, and then once we have it set up in a particular, we have memory set up in a way that has code ready to execute the controller inputs. Once we get the game set up to that, we switch execution over to TASBot, and then TASBot runs a loader onto the game, which then allows the game to communicate back to TASBot using controller rumble inputs. So that way, that's how we set up the two-way communication. And then from there, we sort of patch in a loader and then like a second loader on top of that, so that TASBot can keep communicating with the game after the initial like player one loader that we put into the game. So the initial loader takes a couple seconds. I think it's about 10-15 seconds. You'll see Link while he's shielding and the camera's up against the wall and he's like wiggling around.
You want it to be more impressive, by the way, but it's just like doing a couple of, it just like I was really laughing out loud at that moment because I'm like, that was it, huh?
Yeah, it looks a little silly, but that's setting up the loader so that TASBot can keep communicating with controller ports 2 through 4 after we switch control back to me. So that way we can start loading in all the assets and the actors and the data for the run in the background while I'm able to play through the game normally. So once TASBot does that initial loader and we switch control back to me and I enter a house and exit it, it loads in a couple patches so I can like show off the R wing and like show off the debug menu. But while I'm doing that, it's still loading in more assets for later on in the run while I'm doing that. And so whenever I'm going through the Lost Woods, that takes a while. And so that part is intentionally a little bit longer than the rest of the run, so that we can let TASBot keep on adding more assets and getting more of the stuff loaded in while we walk through the Lost Woods. But then once we're done with that, it's about 5 to 7 minutes of loading in new assets, new code, new like the voice lines for like for Link and Zelda at the end. And that the voice actually took up, I think, about, what was it, 30% of all the data that we injected, because it's just raw voice data.
Right.
Breath of the Wild scene was like another 30%, and then everything else was the last like 30-40%. But yeah, so the game injects everything for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then after that it's done until we get to the very end, whenever we do Here Together and Twitch chat is on screen. That's whenever TASBot reinitiates communication, because it needs to read Twitch chat and send the messages through the controller ports to the game so it can display them on the screen. But yeah, so it's 5 to 7 minutes of injection at the beginning, and then after that, everything is stored in the expansion pack on the game. We have to use the expansion pack. That's where we store everything that we load in. Okay. Otherwise, we don't have anywhere to put it. We can't write to the cartridge. It's that static. We can't do anything with that. So we load it all into RAM through the controller inputs, and then we just play the rest of the game off of that.
Thank you for answering Little Melly's question there about the percentages kind of wise of how much of the data it takes up. The seamlessness of the whole presentation was the other aspect of this that I found really just quite amazing. And I'm assuming, but I don't know, how much of the dialogue, the text boxes, were those created by the team, or did some of those exist already? I'm curious how, because the script was wonderful. Like, it was really great how it just all seemed like it was actually in the game. And I'm curious about some of that.
A large majority of that was, I think, all the text boxes were custom content. That was all written by our by the folks on the team, mostly Sarin. All the cutscenes and all the custom actors were like the special code for the custom actors were written by us. So like the Running Man, he existed, but we had to create this boss version of the Running Man that sort of tied in with the storyline that we did, and all that was custom content. By the way. yeah but we led in with the beta rupee. It's like, oh yeah, this is the beta rupee, it's an actual thing in the game, and then when you touch it, it explodes, and it's like, that's all true, but then there's the Running Man behind it, and he says, oh, you fool. Yeah. And it's a great experience, and it's when you go back like and listen to the run, the way that Soren presents the information, it's like he makes sure to note what is beta content, but the things that he doesn't note what is beta content, that's all custom. And then there's also, if you want like a list of everything that is and isn't made by the team, there's gettriforce.link. That's a URL, GET triforce.link. It'll give you a like a laundry list of everything that's custom and everything that was beta in the game. And then like all the music was also custom as well. That didn't exist. Like the Unicorn Fountain, that was recreated based off of like old screenshots. The beta fairy did exist, although I think all the animations and stuff we added to it were custom. Yeah, a large majority was custom content. There was some beta stuff, like all the beta fairy, Unicorn Fountain, like Overture Stages. All those are beta content, but recreated by the team for this showcase that we did. So by that definition, like the beta content didn't need to originally be on the cartridge. Not all of it. So some of it was, not all of it was. A lot of it was recreated, and then there was also all the custom story elements that we use to tie a lot of the things together as well. So it's a big mismatch of all the three. If you watch it for the first time, it is a bit hard to discern like what is actual beta content left on the cartridge and what is custom stuff made by the team, or like a mix of it. But that website that I gave, the get triforce.link, does go through everything that is and isn't, or is a mixture of beta content.
I'll include a link in the show notes in the description so you all can have easy access to that as well. I think that's really, though, a testament to the designers and developers of this presentation, because the fact that you couldn't tell what might have been on the cart and what wasn't, the whole thing was so seamless. I do got to ask, were there any points during rehearsals or anything like that where the presentation did crash or something didn't go as planned? And how do that's got to be a little terrifying, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple variables. Like if I didn't do the RTA setup correctly, whenever we switch control to TASBot, like whenever the camera swung around, either nothing would have happened or the game would have just crashed, and that would have hurt. Yeah. I think so. That happened, I think once or twice in rehearsal, and then I was like, hold up, I need to figure out the variables that are causing this, that I am not able to notice, and then figure it out. And so I have 100% success rate on this. And so I spent a lot of time just like figuring out every little piece of the introduction that I need, like figuring out every single variable, so I know 100% guaranteed like if what I'm gonna do or not for that. And so I was able to get, I think 12, like whenever we were at GDQ, I was able to get 12 like runs of the intro in a row, and I was like, okay, I figured it out. We're good to go.
Yeah.
But as for like the content created by TASBot crashing, there was one run that we were doing like before we got to GDQ, a couple months before, whenever we were practicing like on Discord, where whenever we got to the Zora's domain and we used the fire medallion to melt the ice in Zora's domain, whenever I turned the camera around after doing that, the game just crashed, and we had zero idea why. Like we spent time looking at the actor code, like trying to find like a bug or something. It's like we have no idea what could have happened. And you're just like, okay, that's really scary. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. And then it never did. So it could have just been a random one-off crash that is like, I don't know, like it's completely random, maybe unrelated to something else. Maybe like some wind hit the cart and it wiggled a bit, because you know how like easy it is for carts to, like the Nintendo 64 carts to crash if you touch them or whatever. It's so it could have just been something like that. But besides that, I think we haven't had any major issues with our content not working.
I haven't had a chance to chat with Duango since the presentation, so I'm curious. One of the, I mean, it's the kind of the apex of this presentation is here together towards the end. A comment that flooded the chat per your all's direction, and that we saw in the game come to life, and then for the rest of the marathon became the defining two words of the whole entire event. How did that, how did that get decided? And I'm curious how that became how that got to the stage.
Oh gosh, I actually don't know how that ended up getting decided. Maybe I can search in the Discord real quick here together, and then just do it by the oldest result.
Mm-hmm. This is exciting. Real time.
It looks like it looks like the initial idea was just the word together.
Okay.
Although they were talking about, okay, that sounds okay, but maybe we can like do something here together. It's not that much longer. It looks like we're allowing them to some casing differences. It sounds like they discussed this in a voice call beforehand, the way that they brought this up without a lot of previous context. So I'm sure that they were talking about the run in a call or something beforehand, and they were able to like hash out different ideas that they had, and that was just one of the ones. I wasn't a part of that process. Okay. Like I said, I'm mostly just the real time and the SRM nerd to help figure out those things. And but the rest of that was all the story and stuff was the rest of the team, mostly Soren and Dwango and a couple other members.
It's rare. It's not too often playing a game or being at something like this, I get emotional. A lot of times when we've hit certain million milestones, and the whole room is going absolutely apeshit crazy and stuff. And so like that was one of those moments. Even just watching it, on the stream and being in the chat at the time, it's really it's a moment I'm not going to forget anytime soon. And it was just so perfectly placed, and especially considering things that go on in the world and all that kind of stuff. Just the fact that we all had this communal experience. It's 100,000 people sharing something like that was. I have trouble articulating it and putting it into words.
Yeah, it's a big culmination of everything that like people like wanted in Ocarina of Time, like for decades and decades, because of so many rumors of all this. Whenever like the game first came out, rumors of beta content that might still be in the game. Like for example, like Unicorn Fountain, there had been so many rumors about that, like since the beginning of Ocarina of Time's release, and people are like, oh, can we still find it? And then like, of course, like now in the future, like, we've had people like tear the game apart to its last bit. And there's none of that on there. You go on the cutting room floor, you'll find every single piece of content that is left on the game that isn't used. And Unicorn Fountain not on there. It's you would have to have like an old developer build or something if you wanted to see the original state of that. But yeah, so we're presenting all these old rumors that gamers had, like, oh, can you get the Triforce? Where's Unicorn Fountain? It's like all these things. We bring it together using TASBot and like make the dreams of millions of players come true. Like finally, over 2 decades later, and it's beautiful. It really is. To see it all come together.
I gotta ask from your perspective, because trying to actually play this version of the game is not actually the most easiest process. There, the what you all did there was pretty unique and amazing. Actually getting a chance to play that as a gamer, come on, that'd have been pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, I think I guess I am the only person who has ever played this legitimately. Yeah, there's the files for it do exist on GitHub, which you can get through that gettriforce.link, but it's not in a state that you can just like plug and play. That someone would need to write a patcher for it, and I don't think there's been any effort from anyone to do any sort of thing like that. Maybe someone will take up the work in the future at some point, but unfortunately, it's not available as a playable hack right now. So
Dwango was talking a little bit about it on his stream, and there's a lot of challenges that get presented trying to patch something out like that, not to mention the time that it's going to take and the effort. So maybe at some point, but it sounds like it's quite a process, to say the least. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that y'all did this and blew my mind, and I watched it again, the whole VOD again, just in preparation for our chat today, and I'm still looking at it, and just that moment where we see kind of the Breath of the Wild scene where Link and Zelda come on screen and we get it in the clouds. Do you know, actually, are those Breath of the Wild assets, or are they?
No, they're recreated.
They're recreated. Okay, gotcha.
Yep. Breath of the Wild, like raw assets would not. It would be way too many polygons for the 64. Way too many polygons.
Had a feeling. Like that just seems wow. Okay. How about yourself? I've noticed I was looking over your SRC profile, and you've had some recent runs that you've submitted. What are you currently grinding, and what do you see yourself grinding into the future or speedrunning into the future?
I've been rotating around a couple different categories, mostly 80% and All Dungeons SRM. Those are the two main categories that I've run, mostly because All Dungeons SRM I helped route. Like once SRM came out, I helped with a lot of the initial routing for that for the SRM applications that it currently has. There was like some earlier ones that I wasn't a part of, but like the current route was mostly made by me. And so I've put a lot of my time into that. So I like to get that time lower. And then also 80% because of the new intro skip. Normally that game would take about a little less than 7 minutes for a full run. But you do reset about 3 minutes or 4 minutes in. to RNG rupees, because you have to slash the bushes out of the crawl space from where you get the sword, and you have to get 8 rupees from all the bushes, or you have to reset. Otherwise, you can't get world record. So you watch 3 minutes of intro, do 1 minute of gameplay, and then you reset. And you do that 6 out of 7 times. That's about what the odds are for you to get RNG rupees. But now that we have intro skip, you play the game, you get the sword, you slash rupees, you don't get it, you reset. You start, sword, rupees, reset. And it's a much better process than sitting through 3 minutes of intro just to get that point again. So I'm going to be doing any percent again very soon, I'm sure. Probably going to try for world records, see how feasible it is. But then also I've recently been doing a lot of bingo. Bingo is a really cool form of Ocarina of Time speedrunning, where you generate a card and it gives you a bunch of goals, and you have to pick a row or column, or like bottom left, top right, or top left, or like top right, bottom left. And you try to do those goals as fast as you can, and you will all share a board. Everyone in the bingo race will share a board, and everyone can pick their own row, and whoever gets the fastest one and they're able to execute it wins. That's a lot of fun, because you get to sort of like see a lot of the game in different ways, and you have to route on the fly, and so it really tests your knowledge of the game, which I've been learning a lot just by doing a lot of bingos in the past couple of weeks. That's been a new thing that I've really found myself to enjoy. So
I've been enjoying watching a lot of bingos over the past few years, specifically what you're talking about. Like, as an audience member, we try to figure out some of this stuff too. Like, oh, where might that that bingo piece be, and how could you go about doing that and get that one at the same time? Really just a lot of interesting things happening in decision wise. Has a little bit of a randomizer feel to it as well, but it's like a game. It's kind of, you're playing along with it.
Yep.
Well,
big fan.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time and giving us like this behind the scenes stuff, but also some deep breakdowns of Ocarina of Time. It's one of those things where I really enjoy the marathon presentations, because it gives me a chance to kind of catch up on some of the tech and hear explanations of this. But also getting a breakdown like this is it makes it a lot more accessible for casual fans like myself, especially if if you load up your stream and you see all of this is great, kind of crazy stuff happening. It's helpful to know a little bit of the process behind it. If people want to find you as you're streaming, or your VODs, or any of your content like that, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, all of my socials are just /Savestate, so it's YouTube and Twitch and Twitter, all of them /Savestate. You can find me there. I'll usually tweet either shit posts or Ocarina of Time content, or Melee content as well, because I still play Melee competitively, so you'll see a bunch of combos on there. Otherwise, I'll usually just stream Ocarina of Time whenever I do stream on Twitch. Or for YouTube, I'll post VODs or strats that I come up with or am documenting for Ocarina of Time. Yeah, if you're interested in all of that Ocarina of Time and Melee content, feel free to follow me or subscribe or whatever on those places.
And I want to give a quick shout out to the Ocarina of Time SRC page, because I just going through the guides and resources, there is so much information about the game that y'all have cataloged now over a decade at this point. But there is, depending on what category you want to, if you want to join and still speedrun this game, there is still so much that you can get into and find a way. The fact that you have a 3-minute speedrun and a 4-hour speedrun, there's really a speedrun category for anybody of this game.
Oh yeah. And that reminds me, like with stale reference manipulation, when that was found, a lot of people thought that was going to it's going to kill the game or change things irreversibly. But what that ended up doing was only adding new categories, because things like all dungeons and like 100%, they had the old versions, but then there's the new SRM version that we added alongside with it. So now we have SRM categories all along, from any percent to all dungeons to 100%. And then we have the no SRM categories for any percent, which is now called Defeat Ganon. And then also things like all dungeons and medallion stones and trials. And like you said, there's a range from the short categories to the longest, and various amounts of glitches or no glitches along the way as well. There's glitchless categories. So there's really anything for everyone if they have any sort of interest in Ocarina of Time. Take a look at the leaderboard, see if there's anything that interests you, and there's links to the Discord, which has a bunch more resources and people that you can ask for questions. It's really, the game has a lot to give, and it's really cool.
I also got to thank you for some of the, I guess it's been over the last year or two, some of the name changes on the categories, because first, as an Ocarina of Time fan, the first thing I do on Twitch, I wanted to go find, Ocarina of Time speedrunners, all those type of things. And people would be running categories like, no, I am, no WW. I'm like, what the hell is all that? I didn't understand all these abbreviations and acronyms and all that kind of stuff. And I got to tell you, it's pretty easy, at least from a top level. 100%, all dungeons, defeat Ganon. I mean, these are things that if you know the game even just a tad, you could understand that. I really appreciate the name system.
Yeah.
Come up with.
The only a little bit weird ones, I guess, are GSR and MST, but once you break them down, it makes sense. Like MST is Medallion, Stones, and Trials, but there's a list of glitches that are banned.
That's cool.
And then there's GSR, which is Ganondorf Source Requirement, which is you have to defeat Ganon, but you have to get everything to defeat Ganon from Source, and there's also a lot of glitches that are banned as well. So it's only you're sort of limited in what you can do. And you have to get certain items from their original location to do it. But the routes for those are all documented and everything. But like everything else, like you said, like all dungeons, any percent defeat Ganon's, like you can sort of just look at it and understand what's going on there.
And at this point, just the fact that there's all this documentation exists and videos and all this content around the game, it's really, however you want to experience this game, if you want to attempt the speedrun, I really feel like there's just a resource for you out there. If you want to dive in deep, if you just want to play it yourself too, you can do that too. There's just a lot of great stuff out there, and I'm really appreciative that your community has taken all the time to do this. So pretty awesome. Well, Savestate, once again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you staying up late too. I'm in California. He's they're in Sweden, so it's like the fact that I actually got the time zone right was a big thing to me. So,
are you familiar with Discord timestamps?
No, that was a whole new thing for me. I had no idea this existed. I've screwed it up, especially the folks in Sweden and Europe. I've screwed it up so many times. So,
yeah, it's super useful. And for those watching at home, if you aren't familiar with it, there's Discord timestamps which allow you to post a time like formatted in Discord that will show up the same for or not the same, but it will show up in everyone's local time zone that they're watching. So like for me, it says that right now it's like 10:30 p.m. But if someone in California looked at it, it'd say like whatever, like 2 p.m. or whatever. 1:30, yeah. Yeah, so very useful if you're planning things.
My mind is blown, and I feel like if I screw this up anymore after this, I have no excuse. Like, this is the tool I've needed. So. Anyway, thanks again, Savestate. I really do appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff people say at the end of a video. It honestly all goes a long way to help the podcast. Thank you so much. If you want to join us on Discord, we chat mostly about food, but occasionally we do talk about the stuff that's in the podcast. The link is in the show notes or in the description. Feel free. Come on by. Join us. If you want to follow on Twitter, Sequence Break PC. Sequence Break PC. I post when I go live. It's kind of not at a set time, so if you want to see the live feed of the podcast, feel free, follow there. And finally, if you want to email, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Sequencebreakpodcast.com is also where you can find the backlog of all of the episodes. It's also on YouTube as well, so feel free, join in, have some fun. Thank you so much. I will see ya in the next one.